Okay, we're here again. The state of the nation, Nigeria. Nigeria, I say it all the time, the largest concentration of Black people on the face of the earth. Now, plenty to always unpack. There's a lot happening politically with the political parties and all that. But there's also a lot happening in the Middle East vis-a-vis the oil and the war in Iran. And of course, that means that the price of oil has gone up. But you know the way it is. If it goes up with the crude oil, with the barrels, the pump price also goes up. But however, the country is making much more money and it has to be a way to spend it. We've seen countries like Norway, there's always a peg on what they spend, irrespective of the price of oil. They have one of the largest, if not the largest sovereign wealth fund in the whole world. They've made provision for the generations coming, the next one after that. So, but then we need to ask and find out how can Nigeria manage its oil booms? In the past, we've tried, but we never did it. We had some head of state sometimes back say, our problem is not money, but how to spend it. Lo and behold, look at us today, heavily indebted. So we have someone that knows about this kind of thing, knows about budgeting, transparency. He's paid his dues. He's a parameter and a yardstick for making this kind of discussion. He's a no-holds-barred person. He says it all the time. He says it the way it is, eminently qualified. That is why today our guest is Oluseun Onigbinde of BudgIT. So, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, great. It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so
I'm sorry to disturb your vacation, but these are pressing national matters. They're even more important than the politics and the parties. We have a lot of money coming in, and we don't know whether it's well spent. I mean, for those of you that don't know, Sheo is a Nigerian entrepreneur, public finance expert, leading advocate for fiscal transparency and open data. He's best known and as the co-founder of BudgIT. You always see when they come out with statistics that corroborate what should be done and what has not been done. A pioneering civic technology organization that leverages data and digital tools to simplify government budget and promote citizens' engagement in government. So once again, Joe, I welcome you to State of the Nation, and I'm sure it won't be your last, because as events unfold, I'm sorry that there's so much to talk about. Because It'd be good to talk about the depths in future, but there's a lot to talk about on the issue of the oil windfall. So my first question to you in this regard will be, Nigeria has experienced multiple oil windfalls in the past, yet development outcomes remain most underwhelming. So what specific mistakes from previous oil booms must Nigeria avoid this time around? Over to you.
All right. Thanks so much. The oil boom is coming, but it's not yet here. But
we're saying the price go up now.
Yeah. And the reason is that maybe in another 3-4 weeks, we will see all the revenues kick in. Most times oil prices are in futures.
Okay, that's true.
Mm-hmm. They are always there's always like a lag, 1 month, 2 month lag. So obviously, it's already very clear that for those cargoes that we are selling today, which we are going to possibly go into contracts today, we will receive far, far more higher funds than we used to. And it's just like we've had different cycles of oil boom. My estimation, we've had 8 cycles of oil boom in Nigeria. We had in the early 70s. That's 71 to 73. We had another oil boom late into the 1970s. That was prior to Shagari coming on board. So that was another oil boom. Then we suddenly had another oil boom in 1993 during the Gulf War crisis. So we had another oil boom in that period as well. So that my own takes me like the third oil boom. Then we had another oil boom early days in the Obasanjo regime, gave us significant lift that we that we needed. Right. So that's like the fourth oil boom.
The second Gulf War.
The second Gulf War, yeah. So when we had another oil boom again was leading towards the recession, 26, 2007, 2008, before the oil prices now crashed significantly. The oil prices reached $147 per barrel there. That would be like my fifth oil boom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct.
Then suddenly, Jonathan came in, oil prices dropped. 2011 to 2014, that was like to be the sixth oil boom. That was when Jonathan had this oil price was above $100 for 44 months that you can remember fully. So we had another oil boom there. Buhari had an oil boom due to the Russia and Ukraine crisis. After there was a dip, so seventh. So this is possibly my own estimation, our eighth oil boom.
Because I was writing that down and I was,
our eighth oil boom as a country.
Wow.
And it's extremely important to say, what did we do with all these super cycles? What happened in those times? There were times in which we expanded public expenditure, expanded public welfare programs, which we did in the 70s. There were times where the money was not even unaccounted for, like happened during the Babangida time, that $12 billion. I mean, $12 billion was a whole lot of money then in 1993, was solely unaccounted for. Or there were times where we used the oil booms for consumption, which was what we did with subsidy money under the Jonathan era. We kept the exchange rate artificially strong. We made sure that we kept consumption with foreign subsidy. Whatever we saved, whatever we could borrow, we were using all of that money for subsidy. There was that. And there was an oil boom that we didn't even harvest, which was the Buhari oil boom, because we couldn't bring production to the table. So oil boom, the price was booming, but the revenues were not coming in, because at that time, somehow, another Buhari oil production dropped around 800, 900,000 barrels per day. And I wanted to leave this context to show that how we have mismanaged these opportunities, either waste, either expanding government, either blatant stealing, or either you possibly just call it inept leadership. And it's a lot of Nigerian to unpack from these different themes now to say what happens now. Now that we are free a little bit from the first subsidy and because of the removal, which means that all of the money would be paid into the treasury of government, which means also that NNPC that used subsidies as a cover to take more than necessary will no longer have such benefit. So it means that we have a lot to learn. I don't think that we have learned, because we've had a bit of gains. For example, we did a sovereign wealth investment fund, which at least in those times was a reasonable position. Now that we have at least have a bit of savings to make some quasi interventions. But if you look at it from an aggregate perspective, our management of the oil revenue and oil boom cycle has been terrible. Is it that we're expanding government, or is it that we are practically just wasting it? And you might not say from the perspective, but even the last 2 years has been a boom for the Nigerian, especially the state governments. Revenues went 3x, most of them now are languishing in surpluses as much as possible. They don't even need to borrow anymore. Just because you suddenly just find yourself with, you were on a FAC of 4-5 billion naira before. Now you suddenly have 18 billion naira per month. So obviously that's a boom in itself. So Nigeria has not been bereft of booms. If you put that nominally, it's a question of what have we done with it.
Wow. Okay, so let's look at a little bit at transparency and accountability, which was, of course, clearly that's the next stage based on what we have been talking about. So given your work at BudgIT, how transparent is the current management of the oil revenues, and where are the biggest accountability gaps today? You said, well, even without the oil boom, because of the removal of subsidy, 3x now from FAC, so that's a boom in itself. But wherein lies the biggest accountability gaps today? Is it just the lack of prudence on the part of state governors and government, or civil servants, or generally? Let's hear from
the general issues. From the oil production, let's not forget that we moved from NNPC to NNPCL, because that's like the major center of Nigeria's oil governance. And now, but for me, it was more like a change of nomenclature, because technically, we asked NNPC to be private, but we did not allow NNPC to do what private companies would do. Private companies will optimize for efficiency. They had failing assets like refineries that are being constantly funded. We even borrowed to even do a bit of turnaround maintenance on them. $1.5 billion was spent in recent times. Nothing came out of that. Then you also have like a bloated corporate structure as well. The reality is that there's so many opportunities for waste. And I guess, give the president a little bit of credit, what he did recently, telling an NPC, bring all the monies to my pocket. And it was more like it's an existential or survivalist decision because no matter how much we think the state governments are having a lot of money, look at the finances of the federal government, coupled with its own fiscal indiscipline. The federal government does not have as much money as it would want to have as well. But state governments have more money because also federal government is choking on debt servicing costs, especially on external debt. Around 18 trillion is spent on external service and domestic and external service on Nigeria alone. So there's a lot of waste that's built up into that region. But if you look at the oil sector perspectively, the challenges that we see have around production, optimizing production. Country of 230 million people are producing 1.6, 1.7 million barrels per day. Iraq, with all its wars, with all the wars it went to, still can bring 3-4 million barrels per day today.
So things are working, everything is working.
Anything is working with all the wars. I mean,
electricity.
That's a war-torn country, So the first problem you look from that spectrum is that production, we are not even there. It's just now we're beginning to get private sector investment much more. There was almost like a decade and a half where the entire sector was in comatose just because we could not pass at least something seemingly like a governance legislation like the Petroleum Industry Act. So we're still reeling from that. So production first problem. The second problem as well is allowing NPC to be an NPC. Letting it be a full business. And I guess what you expected, we passed the PIB it's almost 4 or 5 years now that we've passed the PIB. What should have gone forward at this point should have just been NNPC, for crying out loud, go public. What is the symbol? And I've heard that recently, but I don't know how serious they are about that. Those are the issues because you're running like a state oil company. You're not running as a company that you are not it's not as if you are benefiting Nigeria. It seems you are benefiting yourselves in the process. So there's improved governance in the oil sector. It's not where we want it to be, but the question is that more money now in the hands of government. The question is, what do they do with it?
With the money.
What exactly are we doing with it? It's more devalued money because it was money that you went from 400 naira to $1 to 1,500. So it's plenty naira on the table. The question is that what exactly are we going to do with that?
Wow. Well, what's the importance or strategic relevance of the Dangote refineries in all this?
I mean, it's a welcome. I went to that refinery. He invited me to that refinery. I saw it. I mean, I would say it to me. It's honestly, it's an engineering marvel. It's an incredible. I mean, you might not agree with him, and there are many reasons we not to agree with Dangote. It's a capitalist at heart, but what he did in that place was incredible audacity. And it just tells you how, and number one, first thing is that nobody should have all that monopoly, which is the purpose why our own local refineries should have worked, the Port Harcourt, the Warri, the Kaduna refineries. But now Dangote supplies around 70% of Nigerians, according to the NMDPRA report in February. 70% of Nigeria's oil for fuel consumption is supplied by Dangote as of February. Also, it's a double whammy because now the time you are selling crude to Dangote in Naira, you are practically, reducing the earnings you could have made in USD, but it's fine. It's just that you are trying to create an economy that is a little bit not subject to external influence. So I feel like from a macro perspective, it's a plus to Nigeria. The problem I worry about is that don't allow monopolies, don't allow extreme dependencies, because so Dangote has proven that from the cement environment, that is not, he's a winner takes all man. You understand what I mean? And everybody keeps arguing that point that the revenues or the profits from the Dangote cement compared to any global averages is obscene. It's not, you don't make those tons of, so which means the price of cement keep climbing up and every single day, it's 12,000 naira per 50 kg. So there's a problem here. And so the government should also ensure that Dangote's refineries or whatever it is do not have that kind of monopoly. But I think in this highly uncertain time, where energy security is a massive issue in the global sphere. America cares about it now than ever. Even people like China are doing huge stockpile of fuel.
The largest right now.
Yeah, it's in China. Russia is now much more excited, because now it can even if his oil is banned, It can still sell a little bit at the premium. So,
Zambia has gone back to Russia to get.
yes, now. So obviously, and America is pumping nearly 13, 14 million barrels per day. It's also very obvious that energy security in a time of fluid geopolitics, I think the Dangote refinery has been.
I think if Boa comes on stream, it's of lesser capacity than Dangote. It can buffer the remaining 30%. You understand?
Yeah, we are in that place. And there are also micro refineries that are also
a lot of them.
30,000 there, 15,000 there. They could also do much more. But I think if I were in Nigeria, let them just, the same thing Obasanjo did in 2006, 7. Let them just sell those refineries, even at $1 per. If it's going to be for $1, whoever inherits it, go figure it out. When they figure it out, they maybe now come into some cost sharing with the government in some sort of way. But to be honest with you, those refineries under the current system of NNPC or MNPCL, as you call it, I don't think they would work. Because obviously, people who are hired in that refinery, they work in that refinery, they get retired in that refinery. And that refinery has never worked for one day.
I was compiling how much has been spent on turnaround at the time. I think as of second term into Buhari, I stopped at $10-12 billion in the last 20. I know under Abacha, they were doing $250 million per refinery, $250 million per refinery every year. At 4 refineries, that's $1 billion every year.
Yeah.
That's but I think it's also important to give kudos to Dangote.
Yeah, you have to.
At least he believes in the Nigerian project. Yeah, that just it can be done, Okay, let's look at sovereign wealth fund. Countries like Norway build strong sovereign wealth fund, during boom periods and all that. Even non-boom period, I think they have a peg on how much they get from whatever amount the oil is. So why has Nigeria struggled to effectively utilize mechanism like the sovereign wealth fund, and what needs to change urgently? I know we had one during Obasanjo that they left a lot of money. When Jonathan was there was pressure. In fact, the governors forum fought him that they wanted the money. I think it was Peter Obi was the only governor that said, and one other governor said they should save. But every other person, Amechi, Fashola, all of them said, give us the money. So I said, why has Nigeria struggled to effectively utilize this kind of mechanism, and what needs to be done ASAP to oppose such?
We should have done this way back. And I guess, when I look at what the Obasanjo government did with the excess crude account, remember there was a time we used to have $20 billion in the excess crude account.
Even more.
We blew all of that money mostly on subsidies, on maybe plugging budget deficits. Things that, if you look at it tangibly today, to say, where exactly did you purpose all that money to? You can't really say. Imagine we had dedicated all those excess crude accounts. We're getting there. We're investing it in global stocks, investing in it, in massive international projects. Maybe mirroring what the Norwegians have done, the Saudis have done, Ukraine and UAEs have done. Imagine and we have a portfolio of maybe $100 billion today. Imagine all that would have meant for our industrialization. That we're talking about power, that we're talking about energy and the rest. Unfortunately, it's just a problem of Nigerians' unfortunate leadership, the cascade of unfortunate leadership.
So you agree, like people like Professor Tommy and the rest have said, is that our problem is failure of leadership?
Is it simply, Abeokuta said it in that book, The Trouble with Nigeria. It's clearly about leadership that is not able to inspire what change and what growth and what value should mean. And it's always just, it's painful in that direction. My own view is the people of Norway, first, you have to respect their culture. Because if it was Nigeria with our loud culture, there is no way.
There's no other word than loud. It has to be loud.
Yes, there's no other way. There's no other way in which all of that money would have been saved. There is no other way. I don't see. So I have to first respect the culture that has self-restraint and thinks much more long term. It's something you have to first respect. The second thing you have to also respect is the fact that the institutional frameworks, because someone could have saved. I'm not forget, Rotimi Amechi at the point was saving money in River State coffers and saved all that money until it was 6 months to his leaving, and he started spending that money. because he knew that the new government that was coming on board was definitely going to spend all that money. And I know Wike, when he was governor, at the panel and all of that, nothing came out of that conversation. So those have to respect institutional safeguards, that framework, that money. Obviously, we have lost those opportunities. We don't even have that luxury. I mean, the NSI has not gotten significant increases in recent years as you should have gotten, because we have not created a legislative framework to say, for this extra earning we earn as a country, we agree this money goes to NSI. Then even as a state, you can agree that this is your dividend from the NSI. You put in this money there, you invest this money there, and maybe imagine we put all those excess crude accounts into investment. And every state government today, because it's a federation, it's not anybody's personal money, it's not even federal government's money, gets maybe they might even be getting maybe 100 billion naira today as of their own benefits from putting that money into that kind of vehicle. So those are the things we should have done. But learning from all of that processes, appreciate what Norway is doing. There are different ways we could do it, but we need to give a more stronger legislative teeth into how NSI gets more money in terms of asset management. And we also have to burden it less about Nigeria's fiscal problem, because I'm seeing them saying now they invested in fertilizer, they want to fund cancer hospitals. I like it, social development investment, but let's not, what government is supposed to do, let's not quietly start burdening the NSI to do it. Because that's the environment we destroy its mission, which is to build a sovereign wealth fund for the country. We did that with NNPC, I say NNPC, CBN under Emefiele. CBN became Bank of Agriculture. He even funded Nollywood stars. He funded everybody. He funded pharmaceutical companies, funded automobile companies, funded everybody, and destroyed his reputation as a buffer for price stability. So that has to happen as well. But you look at the NSC, it can be far bigger than what it is right now. I mean,
you think we need to rejig our entire financial framework, or maybe even a new constitution, how we do things? Some have said maybe the presidential system is very expensive. Maybe we should try the parliamentary system, because it does look, for example, that at a political level, we're just spending money without recourse to probity or accountability.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth carrying to say we need to, we need to, and I guess when you look at the fact that the way we put up our constitution, we say all of the money, all of the money must be put in the consolidated revenue fund. All of the money. And that's what Tinubu anchored his new charge to NNPC to. That we could have done anything in the PIE that got you 30% of all of this fund, of that fund. But the constitution says all of the receipts of government must be into the fund. So something like that has to change. Constitution also does not provide any safeguard about management of the fund. It says National Assembly hold the executive accountable. It says the media should hold the government accountable. But how? There should be some specificities about deadlines, documentation, frameworks that the Constitution is able to speak to. That people know that they are bound by certain things. Not just so that that a state governor is bound to maybe have a state of the state address. If state governor is bound to provide a list of his contractors, the beneficial ownership of his contractors. I mean, the state governor is not funding something secretive per se. So is building roads, building hospitals, maybe giving money to state security apparatus, but it should be able to be more transparent. But the Constitution itself does not engender transparency or accountability. We have left all of that to either norms. Oh, you must do it because it's a democracy. Oh, there's a fiscal responsibility act. But the Constitution itself should be able to engender some form of accountability and transparency. And I guess it's when we're able to do that we can move things a little bit much more forward.
Okay, let's look at the political will and the structural constraint, which was what my follow-up question was almost sounding like. Yeah. Is Nigeria's failure to convert oil windfalls into sustainable development primarily a failure of political will, or are there deeper structural and institutional barriers at play? It's similar to what I asked earlier, but it's completely different. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at it from a political perspective, we try to convert it's more, and like I said, culture first. It's always good to first dimension things from a
Culture,
perspective
yeah.
of culture, because you look at our culture. Look at the Chinese, look at the Americans. Americans, they
Our
use
problem is cultural first and foremost.
first of all. In fact, no matter how much technical
Culture. We eat strategy for breakfast.
everything, no matter how much technicality, legislation, culture first. And I guess it's something cultural around, which also the institutions now reinforce. And I guess that's what, when it comes to these oil booms and this what you call super cycles, because it's not a boom that will last forever. Give it another 12 months, you might see oil prices just regress back to $60-70 per barrel and all of that. And so it's about us rethinking the culture. Number one, oil itself is an intergenerational resource, which means it's not something we as alone of today are supposed to expend on ourselves alone. That's something we have to be honest about. It's, even though we have, I think I saw a report that we have 37 billion barrels now as in terms of total reserves, of oil, and gas is even almost 2x or 3x of that, you understand? But reality is that we should also know that we are holding these resources, doesn't belong to us again. For this resource can't even finish. That's true. Countries like Bahrain, ran out of oil at some point in time. So we must also treat it like an intergenerational resource, which means we are holding something down for the next year. And that's what you see people like Norway, that's what you see them do. They've run, I'm sure they have been almost 2 trillion naira of $2 trillion.
Yeah, something like that. And I know it was over $1 trillion about 5 years ago. So
yeah, it's almost $2 trillion now. Nigeria is around 3.2 billion. That's what we have that's the total assets under management, our NSI.
Wow.
We were already 2 billion almost when we kicked off these things. Just to tell you that we have not even brought new money in. Into this system, and I'm sure the devaluation of the currency also messed them up, because some part of that money was also kept in naira. By the time they devalue the currency, they don't get as much gain in this. So it's something we have to be strategic about, that this resource is an intergenerational, and that's why you see most countries, they focus on the taxes. Use the taxes, because that's the only way you distribute income to really improve, which is one of the dangers of oil. Oil was not bad for Nigeria, but oil damaged our psyche, our culture. Give us this comfort. Like, we should not care about ourselves right now. We have a resource that can always fill in that gap for us. So if there's one thing we should take away, is taxes is something we should build back a tax. We should focus on a taxed run economy, and that improves accountability, because if you're using my money to flex, to enjoy, it heightens me a little bit more to ask much more questions. Yeah, I mean, look at the UK. UK also has North Sea. They have North Sea.
Yeah, but they don't.
You don't hear about you, or even America drills. America does 13-14 million barrels. Texas and Oklahoma alone does 4x of what Nigeria production is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you don't hear America say, "Oh, this is an oil-rich country." It's not an oil-rich country, because it's treated as a separate resource that is more intergenerational. And for America, even treats it more like a private entity. They don't. The government just takes taxes off it, which is largely even at the state level. Just makes them reflect about their. So it's something we have to think about, a generational resource. And also maybe now, put a lot of accountability and transparency frameworks. Like I mentioned, in Nigeria, everybody has a plan until they get into government. When you get it, and you see how big the largest is, and you see how big the paraphernalia and how big the opulence around public office. Yes, sir. 16 cars on your convoy. Everywhere is arranged for you. Nobody wants to live that life easily. That's the real reality.
Yeah, but the question is, if you can't spend oil money or normal revenue as well, even if you tax the people and they pay the tax, there's no guarantee that you spend it. So what guardrails, for example, do you think we need to add to whatever we're doing right now?
Well, I think we need to get civil societies to be much more front-footed on these issues. And what they should focus on is much more improved transparency. More like getting government to publish much more data. One of the things we've done in budget that has worked a bit is that we've gotten World Bank, to NGF, that's the governors from, has gotten state governors to publish their budget. 34 out of 36 state budgets are publishing their budgets in detail. Budget implementation reports are being published as well. So you begin to see a framework where public transparency is happening, is improving. It's not there yet, but it's improving. Then citizens can see more. The federal government has the Open Treasury platform where the public publish data on actual spending of government. So you see that also improving a little bit much more. The problem that we are facing is much more is lack of transparency. Is that when we do transparency, and which we are getting, is it institutionalizing into accountability? Is it translating to account? Like if I question you how you spend public resource, are you answering me back? Like Lagos State had, there's an issue with Lagos State with EFCC with $13 million money that was alleged to have taken from Lagos State contractors. It was more like a kickback and was funneled into an account. And that money was to be used to procure oil blocks.
Oh wow!
You understand? And for example, nobody has been able to be held accountable. Even the state governor is not responding on that issue as well. And these are people's taxes.
And the world is watching.
But the two things that must happen. One is that they must figure out a way that citizens' voice has heightened to make sure that transparency leads to accountability. The second thing is the consequence management. And believe me, there's no bigger consequence management than the political consequences. If somebody knows that I would lose my seat because of waste of public funds, because of abuse of public resource, they would do better by it. They would. No, they would. Because some people, it's not even about the money. It's just the idea that I'm governor. I was this and that. It's enough to even build a lot of leverage outside public office as well. But if a situation where I take public resources into the news media, it gets people don't owe that grudge. Another 48-hour cycle, Chelsea's playing Arsenal, that situation goes away, and then at the end of the day, it comes to election period, people have no mental model of all of this. The question is that why do you incentivize difference in behavior? So the civil society must rise up to continuously demand increase in flow of information. Citizens must use that information to demand accountability. And either ways, there must be consequences. And without political consequences, we are not going to be able to deliver a lot.
Oh wow, that's scary. I remember when I was younger, one of the encyclopedias I read, I saw Yoruba tribe definition. They wrote "merry making tribe of West Africa." I didn't like it. I was really very, very upset. But we realized over time that it's not an unfair definition per se. It doesn't take away the academic prowess. It just shows that
we're just loud people.
There's a cultural issue to it. Let's look at diversification, rhetorics, and some realities. Yeah. So, and one more question I will call it today. So, diversification has been a recurring theme in policy discussion. So, what concrete step beyond policy statements should the government take to genuinely reduce Nigeria's dependence on oil revenue?
I think at this point, that dependence has gone down a little bit.
Yeah.
Into the 70s, 80s, where we were heavily on it. Now you have, non-oil revenue.
A lot.
Company income tax, the VAT, the customs revenue. All of that is shaping up, to something that is significant. And the federal government even have what we call independent revenue from its agencies. So oil itself in recent time has been diminished. It's just that oil has a significant effect on the Nigerian economy. When oil prices, and the real challenge is that the foreign exchange earnings of oil is significant. Nigerian structure. We have remittances, but oil is still a massive play in that regard. And you can find it.
We need the dollar.
So because of that, it's very critical for macroeconomic stability as well. So you want to have, it's just unfortunate that, most of our oil production, a chunk of it, by the time you have 1.6 million barrels, part of the federal government in that barrel is around 800 to 900 because the oil IOCs would also take almost 700 as part of their oil production cost. Then you were giving almost 400,000 to NNPC before. Now you have to give almost 300 to 400 to Dangote, for him to refine. So you have technically you're paying maybe just 500,000 barrels per day, or even less. Out of that 500,000 barrels, you have mortgaged around maybe 150,000 into different projects. To say, borrow me money, I'll give you oil swap project, Gazelle project.
160, yeah.
Yeah, well, so by the time you look at it, how much is really left of that oil for you?
You have to keep borrowing.
Yeah, but it's really left for you of that oil, a chunk of. So there has to be, and that's my own crux. I don't think oil was massive before, but it's not. It doesn't have that looming effect that it used to have. The only effect I feel is exchange rate strengthening. Can really help in that direction, and also obviously more government resource revenues. But what we have gotten out with FIRS revenues and all, I think we have created that balance. That, I mean, not only revenues for federal government, for the entire federation, is around 65%. Oil has even found a significant delay. So on revenue side, I would say to some extent we've diversified. It's just that we need more from oil because this is a time-bound resource. The world's not going to run for oil forever. And they have even places like Guyana. I don't know if I pronounce the name of that country right.
Guyana, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is a massive oil production spill. I mean, part of where the US is in Venezuela as well, in a way. So you have our oil production cost is also high. It takes around $30 per barrel to produce oil in Nigeria. In Saudis, it's around $6, $7, $8, $9 per barrel because it's oil in the sand. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we have to dig into the creeks and all of that. So and all the security issues and all the production challenging issues as well. That's another issue. We also have to reduce our oil production costs to be competitive. Because there are also other options for people to play along with. That's why even if you destroy Saudi's infrastructure today, in another 6 months, 1 year, they can bring it back up because the production cost levels are really low. So I would say we are there, diversification. We're not there yet. What we should do are two things. If I ramp up oil production as well, because we need that resource to maximize what we can get from that resource and make sure that we make that environment more competitive. The second thing is non-oil production. Non-oil exports for Nigeria is in a horrible shape. No matter how much we have grown in the recent years, it's still less than $5 billion. Brazil does over $120 billion in agricultural exports alone. So we are going to be sensible as a country. We have to ask ourselves, what exactly do we want to do with non-oil exports? And that's what we should be putting our energy so that we can create this rebalanced society that we truly, truly desire.
One of the programs we have on the channel is called Startup and Innovators. So it's separate from State of Nation. So we talk to Nigerians all over the world that have a business idea, that have developed something. And the last 7, 8 editions, we've been speaking to Nigerians in Brazil, all doing PhDs, because the Nigerian Diaspora Organization Brazil organized the competition called President's Cup. So people were pitching in business ideas and all that. And 80% of them don't plan to go back to Nigeria. They've settled there with their family. They said the ease of life, the ease of doing business, and they're sure of getting a job after that. I spoke to a man who evaluated all of them during that competition, and he said he's been in Brazil for over 40 years. In Brazil. So I was anyway. One more question. It's 2 in 1 actually, so I'll lump it together. Iran, it's they just offered the Europeans a mega deal. They'll go through the Strait of Hormuz. A French vessel have passed anyway, and they've offered a very big offer to Europe, to the EU. I'll say Europe because Britain is not there, and they will have to pay euros. They will have to pay euros. That's a mega. I don't see the Europeans saying no to that. So, and of course, everybody in Asia is paying in yuan, and So the question there is, what happens to the dollar with the effort made by the BRICS nation? As Mr. Trump not shot America in the leg indirectly or knowingly? That's the one. The second one is, how can Nigeria civil society better hold leaders accountable and ensure potential windfalls are not wasted going forward? So that we call it a day. Over to you.
I mean, I like your first question about, the dollar. The dollar, the dollar is strong, but it's also a declining. The power it's been declining.
Oh, wow.
It's obvious that, obviously a lot of people still settle trade in the dollars. And I guess Americans forget something that when you use the dollar, it's the faith in American institutions that they trust. Nobody's going to, they believe that nobody would wake up today and say, devalue that currency by 25% or 30%. The centrally planned economy in some sort of way, like in China, you can get some senior person or premier or the leader says, do this to the currency. And so the faith in the Fed, which is Federal Reserves, that it's not bogged down by bureaucracy, bogged down by political expediency, is what is at threat. I mean, when you start threatening the Fed in that regard, believe me, a lot of people start losing faith in that system. And I guess that's my own first thing that I think Americans need to care about first, the independence of the Federal Reserve. Americans have politicized almost everything. They politicize their courts, politicize most their institutions, even their civil societies. They really, that's to the left or to the right. There has to be some deliberate interest to allow its Federal Reserves to be able to be as much independence as possible. Something that we have seen a bit of retreat in recent time. The second thing you also see is also Americans' geopolitical order is also being threatened. I mean, you have this Iran war, for example. You were negotiating. Oman was having a negotiation, and somehow next thing we had bombs going off. They love it. And if you look at the stock market, the US stock market, you see the high volatility in recent times, up, down, up, and all of that. It was up 2 days ago. It was down yesterday again. It just shows one clarity. Like people don't like volatility. If America continues on this track of volatility, in which you elect a good president and you elect another bad president, another good president, people quietly start winning themselves off from that direction. And let's not lie, the oil economy is one of the biggest sustainers for the dollars. I mean, if people start settling oil payments in euros a day, America is going to have a significant problem. Yeah.
The offer is on the table for the Europe.
Yeah, Iran, and Iran is modeling that already by saying, you know what, take this Strait of Hormuz, pay me all my whatever is due for me for that access in euros. Europeans want a stronger currency. They've been battered. It's looked as if they are like the sick continent of the world. No growth has been happening in recent years. They're aging and all of that. They're having identity issues with uncontrolled migration. So now is an opportunity for them to get their energy back and say, maybe we are the buffer against Americans' extreme dominance. And we'll see that it's high stakes geopolitics. I don't know, but America needs to weigh itself to say. And actually, when Trump was campaigning, I said it was all about being domestic. It was about focusing on America first. And now you start going on these wars across the country. It seems a bit challenging and hypocritical. So I worry about it. But I think it's just clarity that America's dominance, dominance they had straight from the 1940s, from the Second World War till date, it's on that constant slide downwards. Because if you are not dominating in the knowledge ecosystem as you used to, if your institutions are not stable as they used to, are not trustworthy as they used to, if those two things are not happening, then obviously the pathways is gradual decline. I mean, we saw it with the Great Britain of this world. The other thing about civil society, what they need to do differently, and I guess is we need to partner, we need to collaborate much more. It's not been easy, and it comes back from the first question, with the shutdown of USAID that's led to this, and this big challenge in the philanthropic sector. Unfortunately, a lot of civil society work is backed by Western philanthropy. That's something we also have to even rethink, because this constant dependence on the Gates, the Ford, the MacArthur's on this world, when does he end? So those are the questions we have to bring forward as well, that we cannot continue in this direction. We cannot continue to drive conversations depending on Western philanthropy. We have to look for local funding to do it. Second thing is collaborate much more. And third thing for me is also use more of media. We do a lot of great work, but nobody is hearing enough of it. I know the Nigerian culture is more like a survivalist culture. Let me just survive myself and my family. Let me escape this poverty trap so that I can kick the ladder down and everybody, I can be at the one at the top. Somehow that conversation has to change. The civil society needs to use the media much more. Maybe we'll be able to get more people to be more sensitized and aware about what's happening, because there's a massive gap there.
Thank you, Sean. I have to release you to go and enjoy your vacation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. To our viewers, you've heard it. Prudency, consistency, the culture of philandering, like you said, is just undue extravagance. We just have to cut it, and hopefully we'll get the requisite leadership. It's a leadership thing, whether we like it or not. You understand? I mean, the trickle-down effect, if the head is doing well, it always trickles down. We've seen it in great nations. We saw it in Malaysia. We saw it in Indonesia. We saw it in almighty Singapore, and the Asian, even in India, we've seen leadership. They are the largest and arguably the most volatile democracy. It's e-voting in India. Almost 1 billion people vote, and in 24 hours, we all know the winner. So there's no reason, the India is almost 7 times our population, and they're getting things done. So in Nigeria, there's really no excuse. So we need to thank Sheon for what he's doing, the transparency, the details, the data collected. We're very proud of you, and keep the fact fine. So see you all on Monday. God bless you all. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.